Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to break down two loops. They're very ambient, they're very dark, and they're quite unique in the style of 808 Mafia. Something I think Pvlace would whip out. Two super fire loops. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into FL Studio. So here we are, we're in FL Studio, we're in the first loop, we're at 140 BPM, and we are operating in F sharp minor. Something special for this loop is that I've actually not started on the one for the chord progression, which is usually something that I do and have done in the past. But for a different flavor, for more interesting chord progressions, you can start on different numbers in the scale. For instance, if I bring up scale highlighting here, so I just realized a lot of this was wrong because the fifth that I actually speak about, which is B in the first chord and F sharp in the second. So the sub bass isn't actually playing the root notes, funnily enough, but you know, it sounds good, so it sounds good. So the numbers I'm actually referring to in this first loop are slightly wrong, but you can see the chord shapes and the notes and the MIDI, so, you know, visually it still makes sense. You can see the F sharp is the 1, and we actually start on the 6th. So the chord progression it's pretty much 6-3. But breaking it down a little bit more detailed, we've got I'm not exactly sure what this chord is called, but it's a D minor with the 5th taken up a whole tone to the B, and that's arpeggiated. And then we've also got the 3rd in the chord, which is the F sharp in this case, played on top of that. So a fairly standard arpeggiation. We then come back down to the root of the note, which is D, and then back up to the 3rd, which is the F sharp again for the first bar. And then from the 3rd, we come down to the C sharp, which is the 7, for a little bit of melody. And then also on top here, I've got this other melody that serves as like the main melody. However, it's just a bunch of repeating notes, as you can see here, obviously. But if I highlight them here, you can see that the velocity decreases slowly. So it's kind of like an echo effect. And it gives it a really spacious, big sound. And I really like that. So from this first bar and a half, we go down to the A sharp arpeggiated chord. This is the exact same chord shape as the first one, just transposed down. Then that's repeated. And we have the same melody structure directly copied over here after that. So basically it completely, like, there's nothing new. The same shape is copied and shifted, but it's just transposed down so that it sounds familiar with a little bit of variation. And then towards the end of the 4 bars, I just have this same chord repeated once again. And of course, this 4 bars is looped exactly over again. And in terms of the notes that are playing here, it's just F sharp, the root of the scale, to sort of give you a little bit of grounding and bass in the key that we're in. And we're using the 2nd and the 3rd as well because this semitone, dark, ambient, really sounds really nice. So that's the first sound. I'm actually using the piano suitcase in Expand. It's the acoustics piano category, and then this preset right here. For effects, if I turn these on, first up we've got D Blue Glitch with this preset here. If you guys want a preset bank for Glitch, this is a free plugin, kind of like Effectrix, except you can't layer effects. Let me know and I'll drop it for you guys. But yeah, the mix level for that one's turned down to around 50%. And then I've got a crystallizer with the reverse spacious preset. Parametric EQ cutting out the low end. And then finally, a fruity reverb. With the regular settings I'm using nowadays, the wet level at about 60%, stereo separation, about 40%, decay time from between 3 and 5 seconds, depending on what sound you're using. If you want something in the background, I usually bump it up to about 5 seconds, but for the main melody, I don't really want a too longer decay time, so 3 seconds suited well here. Turn the size up to 100 and low cut up to between 700 and 1500 hertz. And I've also turned the mix level down to 27% here. So now with all of those effects, it sounds like this. Next, in fact, first, this was the first sound that I used. It's in the vocals category in Expand, and it's the 26th preset called Faithful High Pass. And I've just got it playing the same chords from the first pattern, except they're not arpeggiated, obviously. They're just straight chords, as you can see here. In terms of effects, it's pretty simple for this one. I turned the stereo separation up to 90% on the mixer track here. Quite a narrow band of EQ. And then very similar settings on the reverb here. Not quite as much low cut, but everything else is about the same. And then I turned the mix level down on that to about 50% as well. So those two together sound like this. Very subtle layer. You wouldn't really recognize it's in the background until you knew it was there, but I think it does its job nonetheless. The next thing I added was my Reese 2 serum bass. You pretty much pause the video here and copy the settings if you like. Things to note are the sub, the unison, the first oscillator, and the filter. Play around with this attack if you like. What you see is pretty much what you get. And it's just playing the root notes of the melody. Very simple. In terms of effects, I've just got an EQ because I did forget to mention in the serum, I've got this noise turned on, the ARP circuit noise. Sometimes it sounds good, but sometimes I don't want it in, so I have ducked it in this case. So those three sound like this. Next up, I got this Cymatic Bell vinyl one-shot. We'll start with the effects on this one. I've just got a band EQ here to cut out the low end and some of the really harsh frequencies up top. And then I've got my own preset shimmer panning on Pan Man. Basically, it's panning the sound back and forth quite quickly. And it gives this really cool stereo effect that I like. I do this a lot for my leads, but it's, again, playing a very, very simple melody, using all notes that we used before in our previous patterns. My process here was pretty much just click around, find notes that sounded good, and if my brain was telling me a melody, I sort of just followed it, and that was done on my MIDI keyboard. So for melodies, often starting on the root of your scale or playing around with the fifth of your scale is a really good starting point to getting a good melody. So all the sounds all together up to this point. I think this bell and the top piano notes really complement each other really well in this case. But moving on, I've got some ear candy. We're in BBC Symphony Orchestra and we're using the Celeste. It's in this harp and Celeste category, and I just selected this sound here. And I'm just playing this really quick string of notes. And I kind of wanted like a wind chime effect. One thing to note is the VST probably doesn't actually play these top notes. In fact, I know it stops here somewhere. So it doesn't actually play the very first note, but because they're all so close together, it doesn't really matter. For effects, they're pretty basic. Again, we've got this narrow band EQ, cut out the low end and the really high harsh frequencies. Echo Boy, I've just selected the space echo preset. Sounds pretty good. And then reverb, very similar settings once again as all the other reverbs. That's a good trick also if you want to put all your sounds in a very similar space. Throw a reverb with very similar settings in terms of decay time, room size, and frequency band and stereo separation, but that's sort of less important. And it will sort of make it sound like all the sounds came from the same place and all the sounds in your loop or sample will sound like they belong. But yeah, that's it. All the sounds together sound like this. Yeah, that's the first loop, super fire. Let's move straight on to the next one. All right, so here we are on the second one. We're at 136 BPM, and the first sound I used was once again Expand, the piano suitcase. This sound is fire. This time I didn't put any effects on it, and I'm just playing this very simple pattern. And then for the second half, it's just pitched down an octave. Very simple, but fire. Now, I like the sound of that, but I wanted to make it sound a little bit more unique, a little bit more spicy, if that makes sense. So what I did is I rendered it out, I reversed it, and I put the following effects on. Put gross beat, a half beat gate to give it a little bit of a bounce. This narrow band EQ to give it a space. Put some OTT with 50% depth, just to sort of bring it forward in the mix. If you find a sound is too washy and you just want it to be a little bit grittier, a little bit more forefront, throw some OTT on there. It's free and it's fire. Fruity Love filter. Pretty sure I'm using the simple triangle low pass LFO. If not, I'm using the high pass one. And all I've done is drag in these parameters so that it's half as long. Then I've thrown a ping pong delay on here, turn the feedback down and the wet level down a tiny bit. And then again, reverb with very similar settings. And what I've done here is I've actually automated the wet level on the reverb to swell up into the end of every bar. And so it sounds like this. Very nice. You'll notice in a lot of these loops, the first sound is quite simple. In fact, all of the sounds are quite simple. They're just decent ideas and you just build upon them to make them more complex. So the next sound again is in BBC Symphony Orchestra. This is some secret sauce I see nearly no one using. If you go into percussion here, you go into untuned percussion, you get a bunch of different like drums, cymbals, triangle, bell sounds. Basically, all I'm doing is I'm using that cymbal and I'm swelling it up. You can see the velocity is increasing. I played this in by hand, so it has more of a human feel. But yeah, with the first sound, it sounds like this. It's a little bit ear candy. The next sound I used was this Somatic Odyssey Ambient sound. I made the envelope like this. You turn all parameters down except for hold so that it plays for as long as the note is in the piano roll. I threw the following effects on: an EQ, ducking a little bit of the harsh high frequencies, a tremolator on Premier MIDI. I just find the timing of this one is better in my opinion. We're at 1/8 rhythm. Then we've got a 2-bar wide slow MIDI. This just pans the sound left and right slowly every 4 bars. It's playing this very simple melody, just playing on that semitone again. Give it that dark sound, and yeah, sounds like this. Next, I added this sub bass. This is from the Tri-Freeze Atlanta Culture 2 drum kit. It's free. Again, we got the envelope like this. And it's just playing B over and over again. Give the sample a little bit of low end. Next up, I added some Electra X. We've got the Roy Major Apache bank with the Betray You bell. I did turn the reverb mix level down, the decay time down, just because it droned on for too long and it muddied up the mix a little bit. But it's playing the same melody as the very first pattern, just half as fast, if that makes sense. It sounds like this. Simple effects, I panned it slightly to the left because it occupied a very similar frequency to the first sound. And I threw on this EQ to give it its own frequency range. And yeah, sounds super fire. Now finally I added Nexus. We're in this LV Nexus new bank. And we've got the Watch the Throne preset. We've got an EQ ducking a lot of the high frequencies. An OTT at 50% depth again to bring it more forefront in the mix. And then just boosting some of these high mids and mid frequencies to get it sounding nice and crispy. Yeah, this final sound in the mix sounds like this. And that's it. Those are both the loops that I'm going to show you today. Let me know in the comments which one you prefer. But yeah, that's going to be it. If you like the video, like the video. Subscribe if you want to see more content. Hit the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, drink water, get good sleep. And yeah, until next time, take it easy. I love you.